Welcome to the Well Off Podcast, where the goal is to motivate, inspire, and share success principles. I'm your host, George Masri. Thanks for tuning in once again. I interviewed Brian Gordon, who is an investor that I met through some friends at a stock options lunch, actually. But he's also a member of Durham REI, and I've seen him there a couple times. And he told me a bit about his journey, starting off how his mother told him ever since he was young that it would be great for him to own a property, to own real estate, which was the exact same thing that my mom had told me, so we had that in common. But a few years ago, he said that he started to network and learn more about investing, and he got into duplex conversions in the Durham area. And then he wanted to build up his cash flow a little bit more, so he bought himself a vacation rental in the Blue Mountain area. So he broke down the numbers, the purchase price, the cash flow, the rents that he's getting. So I know if you guys are interested in learning about replacing your income, this is going to be a good one for you. We also talked about a recent triplex project. So as a kid, his dream was to own a triplex. So he bought one just a few months ago in Toronto. Tells us a little bit about the numbers there. And then finally, we talked a little bit about Florida. He started looking at buying some short-term rental properties in Florida, the cash flow that he expects. And again, his goal is to replace his income because he doesn't want to work forever. So he has a 5-year goal. There's a lot of good stuff in here. I will ask you, as always, to share this with a friend or family member, because I think it's important to spread a good message. And then also, if you guys do appreciate the content, please leave us a 5-star review on the Apple Podcasts platform. That would be truly appreciated. All your support is appreciated. It doesn't go unnoticed. Thank you very much. And if you want to connect with me, we have some multi-unit opportunities. We actually have some triplexes and fourplexes in Welland and St. Catharines that are currently off market. So if you'd like to find out more, you can connect with me on Instagram, WellOffX, or go to welloff.ca and connect with me there. Enjoy the episode. All right, I'm here with Brian Gordon. Brian, thank you for joining me today. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Happy to be here and looking forward to our discussion.
Okay, so I don't know if you've ever heard of some of the other episodes, but I always start off by asking you about your childhood. So do you want to tell me a little bit about it and one or two things you remember? Something that stands out.
Sure, absolutely. So I was born in Montreal, Quebec. Spent my first 10 to 12 years there. And then my parents moved us to Toronto, again, when I was about 10 or 12. And grew up mainly in the Toronto area. Lost all my French that I acquired while in Montreal. But I enjoyed my childhood. Very fortunate to have loving parents and living in great communities, and very, very blessed with my upbringing and again the love and support that I had.
Very cool, very cool. Why did your parents go to Montreal? Are they French speakers themselves?
Yeah, great question. So I think as immigrants coming from the Caribbean, they looked at what the best opportunities were for them at the time, and they, for whatever reason, thought it was Montreal because, as many people know, Montreal used to be a booming city. A lot of the, communication companies were there, the head offices were there, and so on. So there was a lot of opportunity. They weren't French speakers, which is probably one of the reasons they decided to leave. But it was, probably the number one city at the time in Canada.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Just out of curiosity, did your parents immigrate from Jamaica?
Yeah, so my dad immigrated. Good guess. My dad immigrated from Jamaica, and my mom immigrated from Guyana.
Oh, cool. I could kind of tell because of the way you say area.
Oh yeah.
I think Jamaicans have a certain way of saying that word, but okay. So, all right, tell me a little bit about your journey. So you start off in Montreal, you end up moving to Toronto. What was your career path and how did you get involved in real estate investing? Sure.
So for whatever reason, and probably this had to do with my mother, she always believed in real estate. Not necessarily as an investor, but we always, they always owned properties themselves, but just mainly their principal residence. But they always felt, and they would always hammer into us that you have to own your own property. You have to own your own property. And then probably when I was at the age of 18 or 19, I remember back then, internet wasn't popular. And real estate agents would advertise on TV and, Friday, Saturday night, as a real estate nerd, I would watch the listings run on TV back then, and you'd see like the Ellie Davis and so on. And I remember that vividly. And I just always believed that real estate was the way to go. And so it wasn't, again, as easy as back then where you could join a real estate group now, and they had, several real estate groups that you can join. So it was, trying to go to a Robert Kiyosaki event. And I remember doing that in London and just trying to find ways to be around like-minded people. Anyways, fast forward to about 10 years ago, I purchased my first condo. An opportunity came up with a family member, and they didn't believe in, I'll say, in purchasing properties, but they rented. So I proposed to the person that, why don't you, and it was like a good, really close family member. So I proposed to the person that I'll help you purchase the property, but you really should buy, right? And they said, no, not going to do it. I said, so then what if we purchased a property, we being myself and my wife, would you rent from us? And they were like, absolutely. So we purchased a small condo for 147,000, again, about 10 years ago in Toronto. And it worked out perfectly. She's still there, and the best tenant that I have to date. And then 5 years ago, that's when I would say I really became a real estate investor. So I joined Durham REI, networked with other like-minded individuals, met some great people. And that's where I really started looking at fundamentals, GDP, really learning how to invest, what to look for, and started purchasing, your, what I call your grandma bungalows, 1960 bungalows, and adding secondary suites to the units to help with cash flow. So I've done that several times over, and I say I got quite lucky in that I got into the market at a reasonable good time.
Yeah, for sure. 147,000, I think you said. That's a pretty amazing number, and only 10 years ago, which is crazy to think.
Yeah.
So you said about 5 years ago, you started taking things a little bit more seriously. You joined Durham REI and some of these other investor groups. What made you want to do that instead of just, doing things on your own? Was it that curiosity for real estate investing? Did you see it as a career path for yourself?
So I went to a multifamily event about 5 years ago, right before I joined, and I met two individuals that I'm still quite close with now, Renee Massi and Sarah Copeland, and they're both members of Durham REI. And they said, Brian, you really should join. It's a great group, and I've heard of Durham REI before, but really wasn't interested. So they both persuaded me, I'll say, to join. So I gave it a shot. I went to a couple of events, and I thought it was amazing. I learned a lot. It really accelerated my learning, my growth. And again, I believe in being around like-minded people. They help you work through problems, solutions. And again, that really just accelerated my growth.
There was something you mentioned earlier about your mom kind of telling you to invest, or making you feel like you're investing in real estate's the right thing to do, and encouraging you. And I had that exact same experience. My mom, she told me when I was really young, did you know that some people buy homes and then they rent them out to people and have them pay for their mortgage and all of their expenses? And you could basically, have this property that makes you money. And that was the introduction to real estate investing for me, or the idea of it. So I can definitely relate to that. And now that you are investing more actively, are you still working? Like, do you have a job that you're working, and are you doing real estate investing on the side, or is it the other way around?
Yeah, so I do have a full-time job. I'm a senior manager. It's in the real estate sector, but more so property valuation. So I support a team of managers and coordinators, and I do that full time. And so I do real estate on the side. We'll call it my part-time hustle. And the way things are systemized, it really doesn't take up much of my time. I'd say probably 10 to 15 hours a week, outside of when I'm working on a new project. Then, of course, it's more time intensive. But yeah, so right now it's part-time.
Okay, got it. How do you plan on being involved full-time in real estate, or like what's the reason you're investing? Did you have like a cash flow goal? Do you want to replace your income, or are you just building a nest egg?
Sure. So, and this is where I would definitely caution a lot of beginning investors to really look at what are you trying to achieve, like what are your goals are. Because when I started investing, I just invested. I knew I wanted to build wealth and so on, right? But I really didn't spend the time to focus on what are my goals, write out my goals, what am I trying to achieve, and how am I going to get there? And so I started purchasing bungalows, adding secondary suites. And really what I wanted to do was replace my income, right? And although bungalows do cash flow when you add the secondary suite, it's not going to be enough to replace your income, right? Especially at the time when I got in about 5 years ago. So although I'm fortunate enough to build up a reasonable net worth through investing over the past 5 years, the saying goes, you can't eat equity or you can't live off equity. So, had I really focused on those initial goals and done better goal setting, I probably would have gone with a different strategy. Now, I still lucked out in that I've done reasonably well, which is great. But again, goal setting is really important. So now I'm really looking at other opportunities on increasing cash flow to one day, step aside from my job and invest full time.
And how soon do you think that'll happen for you?
I think my goal is in 5 years. I'm 43, and I'd say conservatively 5 years, very conservatively 5 years.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm assuming you've already reflected on how you would do that in terms of replacing your income, and what strategy have you come up with that would suit your goals?
So I'm looking at two different strategies. One of them I've already started implementing, one of them being Airbnbs or short-term rentals. I think most investors know it is a bit more work, but the cash flow is much better. And so about 4 years ago, purchased with other investors a property in Blue Mountain. That's done quite well from an appreciation standpoint, but also a cash flow perspective. And last year, I purchased a place in Georgian Bay as well, which is currently under construction, which I'll also Airbnb. So added Airbnb to the mix to help with cash flow. And then also looking at, I'm in the process of purchasing a couple lots in Florida to build, low-rise bungalows, which I'll also Airbnb as well.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about your place in Blue Mountain? Can you share some of the numbers? Like for anyone listening to this that's kind of has similar goals and they want to replace their income. If you have a duplex, like the bungalows you own, you might be cash flowing at like a couple hundred, maybe 300-400 a month typically. But what kind of numbers are you looking at if you're doing short-term rentals?
Yeah, exactly right. So best case scenario, in Durham, you're going to cash flow $200-300 after vacancy, property management, etc. Right, and then after a refinance, you'll probably be cash flow neutral. But in a place like Blue Mountain, we purchased a property for $250,000 just over 4 years ago, and it's a 1,200 square foot townhouse, about an 8-minute walk from the village. Those that are familiar with Blue Mountain, so great location. And you can rent it for about $4,000 a month. So the place that we have is restricted to monthly rentals. So, you can rent it for $4,000 a month. Now truthfully, we'll rent it to family and friends for a weekend. And, we give it to them dirt cheap, usually $250-300 for the weekend.
Really?
And yeah.
Okay.
And, but it's minimal work, they'll clean up when they leave. So it's really minimal work. And
do I count as a family or a friend?
You do now. So it's great opportunity. Kind of lucked out with that as well. And the cash flow is fantastic. And again, we got it at a great time. So it's a bit of luck, but it's worked out quite well.
Okay, $4,000 a month, $250,000 purchase price. So you're probably, I don't know, like off the top of my head, I'm thinking what, like $1,500 a month, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, mortgage payments are like $700 a month. Yeah. Maintenance fees are about $400. Property tax, I think, is about $200, and then hydro, cable, and so on. So yeah.
Now, what about your like cleaning fees and all that? Can you tell us a little bit about the structure around the short-term rental?
Yeah, so the cleaning fees, we do a couple of things. So I own it with other investors. So there are times where if we're going up, we'll clean ourselves. Otherwise, we'll pay a cleaning person $250 a month to do the cleaning.
Okay. Okay, that's pretty good. Are there any other fees or other expenses associated with the short-term rental?
No, not the way we run it. Again, because it's a condo townhouse, so a lot of the major components are covered by the condo corporation. So your windows, your roof, etc. So there aren't any major capex that we have to spend. And then really from a short-term rental perspective, it's really just the cleaning fees.
Okay. And what do you think it's worth today, the property?
Oh, it's worth about 800,000
Wow.
conservatively.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
But again, the market's been really good to all of us.
Yeah.
So I always tell people it's a bit of luck,
Mm-hmm.
and but of course you have to take action to I guess to go on the ride and get that
For
luck,
sure.
right?
For sure. And are you just renting it out on Airbnb? Like that's where you're finding your tenants?
No, so actually it's all through referrals. It's
Okay.
all through referrals, which is why we don't have to pay that Airbnb fee. I think it's 10 or 20% of rents that Airbnb charges. So over the years, we've just used our network again because it's several investors, including myself, and just through word of mouth and again friends and family, it's worked out
Okay.
extremely
Cool.
well. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Like if you have, well, I mean, obviously you can't buy it for 250,000 anymore, but if you had maybe three or four of those, you'd be doing pretty good. Like you're able to replace a good chunk of your income that way.
Exactly. If
Yeah.
you had, like you said, if you had four, right, netting $1,500-$1,600 a month, that's over $6,000 a month net in cash
Yeah.
flow, right? Like the average person can live reasonably comfortable on that.
Yeah. And yeah, for sure. And then, I mean, if you want to do something part-time to make another couple grand a month, then you're living pretty well.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's the difference in trying to be thoughtful and taking your time up front. So again, new investors, really take the time to focus on what your goals are, what you're trying to achieve. So to make sure that your strategy aligns with your goals.
How much time would you say it takes for you to manage the short-term rental?
I'd probably say about 3 hours a
A
month
week, a
at
month?
a month, yeah.
Wow.
Because again, it's spread out between three other investors. So very, very little time. Now, most investors that own Airbnb rentals or short-term rentals, they spend a lot more time, and which is why property management is typically about 20% of gross rents
Mhm.
because it is time and labor intensive.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Last time I saw you, you had mentioned a triplex that you purchased in Toronto. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so really excited about that property. I purchased it private sale. So I got a fantastic deal. And growing up, going back to what you said, growing up as a kid, I've always wanted to purchase a triplex. So it's kind of childhood nostalgia. And the location is fantastic. And for those that are familiar with Toronto, it's at Yonge and Finch in the Willowdale area. So great neighborhood, walking distance to both the Finch and North York subway station. Um, it requires a lot of work. So 1960s, cabinets, floors, etc. But that's where a lot of the opportunities are. So I closed on it last month, and one of the units are currently vacant. And so I'm working through the renovation process now, adding laundry, so your dishwasher, your dryer, and so on, and flooring. So going through that process now, but I paid 1.55 million for it. I put down 30%, 35%. So I had to put a lot more than I typically do to make the numbers work, given that it's Toronto. But after running the numbers and given the location and the type of asset, I thought it made sense. And once the tenants are turned over, the place is renovated, it will be cash flow positive. Not a lot, but it will be cash flow positive. But I'm really looking at this as a mortgage pay down and an appreciation play.
Mm-hmm. All right. Can you tell us a bit about the unit composition and then also the current rents and expected rents?
Sure. So all three units are pretty symmetrical. They're 2-bedroom units, top floor, main floor, and basement 2-bedroom units. The basement unit is a lot smaller because of the mechanical rooms in the basement, so it takes away a bit of the square footage. But what I'm doing is I'm adding a den to the top floor unit. So the units are about 1,000 square feet. And so it has a lot of space to add that den. And the reason I'm doing that is, especially after COVID, there's this big push to work from home, right? Or at least it accelerated that trend. So a lot of people want that space, whether it's a den, an office, whatever it is. So because I have the square footage, I thought it made sense to add that den. It's a smaller den. It's about just under 8 feet in width and 8 by 11, but a good enough size to add a large size desk, your laptop, a printer, and so on. So I think this is one way where I'm trying to add value to the unit. So I'll do that for both the top floor and the main floor. The basement floor unit isn't big enough to do that. But again, it's important to try to be creative so you can try to attract that high quality professional tenant.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool.
So the rents are currently right now, again, the top floor is vacant, but my expected rents for the top floor is $2,300. The main floor is currently getting just under $1,700, and the basement is just over $1,300. I should get for the main floor about $2,300 as well, and these are all plus utilities. And the basement, I should get about $1,900.
Okay.
Conservatively, I can probably get higher, but just conservatively.
Right. So you're talking potentially getting, what would that be? About $6,500 a month in that ballpark?
Exactly. That's right.
Yeah.
So once all is said and done, I'll probably cash flow about $150 a month. So, and also one of the drawbacks to this deal is that I will be managing. Well, a drawback for me is that I'll be managing the property myself. So I typically don't manage my own properties, but to make the numbers work, I'll be managing the property myself.
Right. And is this, did you factor in like refinancing the property? That's what your cash flow would be, or is that with the existing mortgage?
Yeah, great question. So not refinancing. So this really is a 7 to 10 year play at the very least. And so unlike, again, my other properties where the goal is to refinance once renovations are done within 6 months and pull out as much of my down payment renovation cost, I don't plan on doing that. So I won't touch the property probably for at least, again, depending on the market, at least 5 to 7 years.
Yeah. Cool. This was like that dream project that your dream as a kid. You work hard to get to this point where you're in a position to buy it, and it's a solid investment. The location is solid. It meets your criteria. So it's not always about coming out of a deal with no money left in it, or cash flowing, thousands of dollars or whatever. So it makes sense to kind of go after what you want. And that's in that way.
Exactly. Yeah. You summed it up nicely.
Yeah. Okay. And then the other thing you had mentioned a bit earlier was, I think you had mentioned it, or maybe you mentioned it before we started recording, but Florida, you started kind of exploring some opportunities out there. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Sure. So, like most investors, it's very difficult right now to find cash flowing properties that make sense, at least within Southern Ontario. So I started looking at other opportunities, other markets, again, especially since I'm really cash flow focused. I started looking at Costa Rica. Started looking at Florida, started looking at Houston and Austin in Texas. And I've landed on Florida. I like the economics, massive GDP growth, population growth. And this is even before COVID, right? There is a big push now. A lot of people are leaving some of the other states like California. But even prior to COVID, they had great fundamentals, and the fundamentals are just getting better. So I was looking initially at purchasing a couple of units, your 1,400 square foot bungalow properties. But I got an opportunity actually this week to purchase a couple lots. So that's what I'm looking at right now, purchasing those lots and then building. To then end result is to Airbnb them.
Okay. And so are these, well, it's interesting because when you're getting into a new market like that, you have to do a lot of research and obviously figure out whether or not there's going to be growth in the future and whatnot. So it's an interesting project. And what kind of cash flow numbers are you expecting after the project's complete?
So I'm looking at purchasing the lots for $50,000 to $60,000, and the property is probably about a half an hour northwest of Fort Myers. So great location, 5 minute drive to the beach. I'll probably cost about $200,000 to build it, a 1,300 square foot with a pool, lanai, etc. And I'm expecting to cash flow about $2,200 after all is said and done.
Okay. And how many of these are you expecting to build?
I'm buying one, it's guaranteed, and I'm going to look at some other lots.
Okay.
But the idea is to start with two.
Yeah. So you're going to be in it for roughly 260,000 based on what you're saying. You're going to cash flow about 2,200 a month. Seems pretty good. Seems like a pretty good deal.
It is. However, with short-term rentals, right, they're a lot more finicky in that when there's a recession, which typically happens every 5 to 7 years, so you have to budget for that, and typical recessions anywhere from 6 to 12 months. So you can have a drop in demand of 80% for a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a situation like COVID, where you couldn't travel for 2 years, demand fell off a cliff.
Yeah.
For those types of Airbnb rentals, right?
Yeah.
So yes, it sounds great on the surface, but there are some drawbacks, and as long as you manage that risk, you'll be fine.
So do you manage it by basically putting in a larger vacancy rate in your pro forma?
Exactly. I'll put a larger vacancy rate, and I will also upfront put a larger cash reserve.
Mm-hmm.
And I won't start drawing out profits probably for the first year or two, just to build up at least a 1.5 year buffer.
Got it. Cool. Okay. Maybe last thing we'll touch on here is you had mentioned that you do give back to other investors and to the investment community. So do you want to share a little bit about that?
Sure. So as much as I love real estate, and it's been right now the best tool that I've used to generate wealth, along with, of course, investing in stocks and stock options, but I'm a big advocate on financial literacy, financial education. And again, going back to what you said as a we'll say a young man in my late teens, early 20s, is that my parents never really had the connections and network, etc., to say, hey, Brian, I know you're kind of interested in real estate. Why don't you talk to Uncle, Joe, or why don't you speak with my friend who's a developer, right? They never had that network. And, looking back now, I know that having those types of, relationships, network, mentoring would have really accelerated my growth. So one of the things I do for newer investors is I'll spend about 4 hours a month with a new investor. I'll usually do it 2 investors a month. And I'll try to map out a plan depending on where they are, and look at a number of pillars that have worked for me. And depending on what their goals are and what they're trying to achieve, I'll build out a bit of a roadmap. And again, depending on the investor, I'll also allow them to leverage some of my resources, etc. So I do that for 2 investors every month. It's just 4 hours. After that, they're on their own. But it's just a way for me to give back, given how important it is for investors to have a bit of a network and have some direction.
Mm-hmm. All right. That's really nice of you to do. How do people find out about this? Like, is this something you put out there, or do people just reach out to you?
So, typically, opportunities like this, when I'll get interviewed in a podcast, I'll put it out there, or when I'm at, real estate meetups, I'll put it out there. And of course, there's a lot of demand because who doesn't like free support? So it's something that I don't really need to advertise that much. But again, it's just a great way for me to give back. And because, again, I understand the importance of having that, that coaching, we'll say.
Yeah, very cool. So maybe we can offer something to the listeners then. I don't know what would you typically do on a podcast? How would you put it out there?
Yeah, so I'll just say, reach out to me via email, and just do a quick, 3 sentences as to, why we should work together. And, I'll be in contact with you.
Cool. Okay. So that leads to the next point, which is what is the best way to contact you? Do you want to share your social media or whatever else?
Sure. So best way to contact me is through Instagram, and my social media is acquiring_wisdom.
So there you go. For anyone listening, if you want some help with either duplexes, vacation rentals, or if you're interested in Florida, maybe even the triplex type of opportunity, you want to learn a bit more of that, just reach out to Brian. Again, on Instagram, acquiring wisdom, and then we'll also include your information in the show notes.
Sounds
Brian,
good.
Any final words, anything, words of wisdom or anything like that you'd like to share?
Yeah, absolutely. Be patient. That's kind of my theme for this year. Be patient and just surround yourself with individuals that are doing what you wanted to currently do, and stay at it and take action. Take action.
Yeah, 100%. All those things are very valuable and important to do. So, Brian, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it. I'm happy I got to learn more a little bit about you and your story, and looking forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, and thanks for having me on, and have a fantastic day.
Thanks for listening to this episode. Your support is truly appreciated. And if you can share this with a friend or family member that might benefit from the information, remember, our goal is to motivate and inspire others to take action and to build wealth and to become well off. Enjoy the rest of your day.